Okay. This is about 40 pages. I'm going to read it. So, anyone needs to use the bathroom, just kidding. All right. First, I have been a dealer for many years, about 30, I think. And becoming a collector was quite an interesting change. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this better? And the collection, or my interest in this, has nothing to do with who I am or what my profession was. I was a teacher. It has to do with intellectual curiosity about a couple of trade cards that I had. And before I start about Chinese exclusion, I have a question. In high school, college, how many of you learned about the Chinese Exclusion Act in your history classes? I'd like to do a 2. Okay. I'm joining the rest of the crowd. I had never heard of them. I was aware of the racism and stereotyping in Victorian advertising, and kind of sensitive to it because both of my parents came to this country in the early part of the 20th century because of the Russian pogroms. My father was orphaned and came here by himself at age 9, and my mother came here at age 6 with her father and siblings, and they had to leave her mother behind because her mother was blind and couldn't get across the border. So I was kind of aware of the dangers and the results of prejudice. So I don't want this to be a downer. That's not why I'm here. But I want to make you aware of how advertising in Victorian times shaped people's political opinions, and how the presence of Chinese people in just a few states was able to result in an act which Congress passed several times, and starting in 1876 by Rutherford B. Hayes, who vetoed the bill, and it was then made into law as Dick said, in 1882. So, with that, I would like to start. Okay, this is a card from a series of different ethnic groups' dreams. And this is the Chinaman's dream. And if you look at the picture, you can see he's smoking opium and he's passed out. There's a rat on his leg. There's tea. There's the pigtail. And there's the balloon. There was kind of one of the stereotypes was the playfulness and childishness. So this card kind of is a composite of all of the ethnic stereotypes. This is an ad for the 1890, not sure the year, sorry, of the Scribner's magazine. The Chinese must go. And that was the phrase that was on several trade cards that kind of piqued my interest and got me going on this collection. So here's one of the 2 cards that started me. On the left, you see a man with a mustache and a Chinaman, and the name Dennis. How many of you have ever heard of Dennis Kearney? Okay. Well, you're going to learn probably a lot more than you want to know about him. But he was the leader of a group that got the Chinese exclusion law passed in California. So here has the China, this is a metamorphic trade card. And says, Dennis, put your pigtail in. Dennis says, put your pigtail in. Asin, which is kind of the stereotypical name for the Chinese in California, puts his pigtail in, and there's the phrase again, Chinese must go. So this is obviously to kill him. Okay, next card, also a classic image, is for a product called Rough on Rats. And one of the stereotypes was that Chinese ate rats. So here he has one in his left hand, and the one is about to go into his mouth. There's the pigtail, and they must go again, the phrase. And kind of comparing an infestation of Chinese to the infestation of the pests, all the pests that the product kills. Okay, this one shows Mrs. Potts' Satiron. The Chinese laundryman was another stereotype. And the dialect, Melican man instead of American man. And there's Dennis Kearney's name, misspelled both his first and last names. But once again, referring to Kearney and the Chinese must go movement is not mentioned here, but Dennis Kearney, no goodie. So at this point, I said, I want to know who Dennis Kearney is, and I want to know what the Chinese must go is. So this is Dennis Kearney. Dennis Kearney, I will read a little bit about his life, just so you are aware. He was a drayman, which is like a cartman or he transported people and things around. And there was turmoil in San Francisco in the 70s because the economy was bad, and the railroad had been built, and then there was an influx of Chinese laborers into San Francisco. In 1870, the population was 149,000. Chinese immigrants numbered 12,000. There were over twice that number of Irish immigrants. And Dennis Kearney was Irish. So he started a movement called the Working Man's Party, saying that the millionaires in China, in San Francisco, there was a huge disparity in income, were hiring the Chinese and paying them low wages, and the Americans, Irish, who now considered themselves Americans, were not getting the jobs. So this Working Man's Party wound up taking elections. They ran for mayor of San Francisco and won. He founded the Working Man's Party in 1877, and he coined the slogan, "The Chinese must go." He was arrested a number of times for incendiary speech because he had gangs speaking, mobs of people speaking on Nob Hill, where the wealthy people's mansions were, and he incited a riot, and he wound up in prison. So the next picture is a political cartoon that was released on its own. It was not part of a magazine or a newspaper, and it shows Dennis Kearney in jail. This was done by a man named, Isidore Nathan Chiansky, who was booked an antique dealer. And this shows the Chinaman kind of gloating over the fact that Dennis Kearney is in jail. Thanks, Lisa. I've done this in a long time. Okay, so the next group of cards, and this is from a set which I came upon quite accidentally. This whole set is called Dennis, and these are the first two, and these are the only two that I have that actually reference Chinese. Am I in the microphone? It's okay? Um, so you saw what Dennis Kearney looked like. This is the face here is of the stereotypical way the Irish were portrayed, kind of with a bulldog-like face, and often compared to pit bulls or bulldogs. In the card on the left, he refers to the Chinese as Mongolian lepers and attacks them for the way that they dress. And in the right, similarly, he is ousting the Chinamen, once again mentioning their mode of dress. So part of the whole technique of getting this hatred going was the marginalization. It's them versus us. The way they do things is different than the way we do things. They dress different, they look different, they act different, they'll never be able to assimilate. These were the kinds of things that were being promulgated by the Working Man's Party. So this next group of three has Dennis once again. There's no reference to the Chinese, but it refers to the lack of jobs for American workers and attacks the editor of the Associated Press for negative coverage of the Working Man's Party. And that was probably referring to Charles DeYoung, D-E-Y-O-U-N-G, who edited the Chronicle. And he constantly was attacking Kearney and the party. And a man named Collick, who was running for president on the party's ticket, was shot by DeYoung, but he survived the shooting. That got sympathy for Collick. He was elected, and then Collick's son killed DeYoung, who was the editor of, as I said, of the Chronicle. So this resulted in some bloodshed as well. The next group of three, one son, he on the card on the left, there's Ben Butler, who was kind of, they were supporters of each other, is riding in Kearney's drag cart. In the center image, Dennis is depicted as a king, and there's the bulldog, the pipe, and the shillelagh. You see the shillelagh in several of the pictures. And in the third image, criticizes the politician's speech, and we shouldn't hear from politicians, we should hear from the working man. And at the bottom, where it says specimen copies, these came from a printer, and I'll read you what it's, I blew it up, okay. This is actually what it says on the bottom of the card, that obviously this printer is anti-Dennis Kearney and anti-working man. So these are some of the cards that were available. I have never seen any of them, and I've never seen any of the Dennis cards other than this group. Okay, once again, to link Dennis Kearney and Ben Butler, this is a facsimile currency which is attacking the paper money and the Democrats. This is a Republican political piece. Once again, as I said, these two are kind of inextricably linked. Butler supported Kearney, and Kearney supported Butler. And look how Kearney appears in reality versus the bulldog face you saw before. Okay, now we go to some of the images. This is the Missouri steam washer, and there's the Chinese must go. He's running from San Francisco to China, carrying on one hand his washboard and the other hand money. And because of the laws, which if you read them, you'll see the women couldn't come over, the families couldn't come over. So the thing was that they took the money, instead of spending it in the American economy, they came here, worked, and took the money home to China. Okay, this is a cigar label. Once again, the Irishman is kicking the Chinaman out, And the black man, the former slave, is kind of laughing. And okay, next we have a sample invitation. This was a ball invitation printed by Heppenheimer and Maurer, who were known for their cigar labels. And we have the group, there's an the Irishman is almost always portrayed with a pork pie hat and their Chinaman is being kicked into oblivion, and there's references to the trade dollar as well. Okay. I can stop saying okay, don't I? All right, this is another cigar label. The brand is No Chinese. If you could imagine going into a store and saying, "Excuse me, I'd like a carton of No Chinese, please." This is, once again, the Irish kids, the street urchins, and they are using the pigtail, which was an object of ridicule in many, many of the images that I have, which they've tied to the fence. And there's an Irish woman selling produce, and one of the young men has taken cigars from the Chinaman's tray there. Okay. There, I did it again. All right. It's okay. It's all right. Okay. This is a I haven't taught in 20 years, give me a break. This is a play called McSorley's Inflation, which is basically an Irish-themed New York City play. And you can see the Chinaman is at this laundry, Hung Lung Laundry. Laundry, actually, laundry is misspelled. And this woman is railing because the shirt has been shrunk, and the Chinaman is being kicked out. Once again, Chinese must go. Now, American ingenuity was used as a justification to get rid of the immigrants as well, the Chinese immigrants, because they made these inventions that we had, made the Chinaman's work obsolete. So this is Mrs. Potts' sad iron, and there are several images from this company that are definitely anti-Chinese. So the Chinese laundrymen are being led by Uncle Sam from San Francisco to China, following, because they can take the sad irons back to China and they don't need to be here anymore. Best way to get them home is to give them the iron. This is another one, and they use the term goliso, and I looked it up. I could not find it anywhere. I do not know what it means, why they refer to the Chinese man as goliso. But once again, the iron has made the Chinese laundry obsolete. Okay, remember in South Pacific, the song "You Gotta Be Taught to Hate"? Yeah. So this is a toy designed for children, and it's a cap gun that was produced by a company called Ives, which made a lot of mechanical banks and iron toys. When the trigger was pulled, the Irishman's leg goes up and kicks the Chinaman, and it says, "The Chinese must go." And there's the pigtail. He's also pulling the pigtail, which is another common image on this anti-Chinese. But as I said, this is aimed at children, as is this. This card came with Larkin soap. You would take this card. Now, I want you to imagine a child. There was a string that came with this card. You took one end of the string and you put it on they're Irish boys, and the other end of the string went under the bench where the Chinaman is sitting, and you notice it's a stick of dynamite. On the back of the card was a cap, like from a cap gun. So the child is instructed to light the match and light the string on fire, probably burn down more than 1 or 2 houses. And the copy of the card that I have has the cap intact. It was never used. I don't know how many of these survived. Off to China, limited train. Right. This is a series on a folding card. The Chinese shan't come here. And we have an Irishman, a Frenchman, a WASP, Christian, white man, and a German, and they all, in their own dialect, are speaking as to why the Chinese should not come here, their reasons that the Chinese should not come here. And if I were a better accent reader, the Irishman is saying, can anybody do accents? I can't. Hurrah! Can you read it? Can you read the screen or not? All right. Hurrah, be jabbers, ship ahoy. Don't steer your craft this way. Congress settled your hash, me boy. We'll use whiskey instead of tea or tay. Work is plenty, labor's high, but no Chinese need apply. So that's the Irish. And there's the Chinaman heading off in his wash tub, another very common image, and the Irishman with his shillelagh. In the next image, we have the Frenchman. The French man sees a false man, for dance he very much care. This Chinaman, he dance can, avec mucho plaisir. He no vale fair fish, mon cher, for no Chinese shall come by here. Then we have the Shanghai, the laundryman who's ironing. And there's a black man and in the line. John Chinaman does washing cheap. He keeps a laundry place. To rob the women of their bread, he thinks is no disgrace. This noble Christian helps him steal the bread from women's mouths, for cash is all that he can feel. Wash women starve to death. If this is true, we call it queer and vote the Chinese shan't come here. So this was another thing, that there was the Irish washerwoman stereotype was being challenged by the presence of the Chinese, and the Chinese charged less. In the last image, this is the German. Die Deutscher schliep lies all day. He has one long lager beer, and while he lies, schliep dat way, de bummer soon appear. Mit opium smoke the Chinese lay in filthy atmosphere. That is the reason why I say the Chinese shan't come here. So this, once again, is another piece I've never seen another example of. Going to American ingenuity again, or Western ingenuity, the electric battery. And the Chinaman is being encouraged to hold on to both parts of the battery, and he's about to take his passage back to China. This one also refers to the electric battery. Damn, American man. And it's an advertisement for a cigar. And the Irishman is to the left, and the Chinaman is about to get shocked. This, unfortunately, is the only piece I do not own. This is John Kemmler's cigar label, and refers to, if you want to get the Chinese to leave, have them smoke their own cigars. The cheap Chinese cigars were another Another stereotype that the product was inferior. I don't smoke cigars, so I have absolutely no idea if that's true or not. But you see them all looking kind of sick from smoking their own cigars. Cause and effect. So they'll leave if you give them their own cigars. Same theme in the next one. This is from a company called Sanderson and Horn in San Francisco. And walking races were a fad, craze for a while. So in this walking match, Sanderson and Horn's cigar, which is made by white labor, is winning the race. The Chinese cigar with a pigtail is lying on the ground. And the New York tenement cigar, which was done by mostly child labor, is also behind. And you see them in the back, hurrah for white labor. So the phrase for white labor in the West Coast meant not Chinese. This is from a Brooklyn clothier, and it's a with and without. In the left-hand image, the Irishman is complaining that he's worn his suit for 2 weeks, and it's falling apart. The owner of the store is Jewish. There's a stereotypical like this, like, what do you want me to do? And the Chinese laborers are working in the back. And to the right is the store, McKeon and Todd, where you ought to buy your clothes because they're not going to fall apart. This card kind of says it all. This is for the celluloid collars. The celluloid was developed and put into the collars, bosoms, and cuffs of shirts. And once that was done, you could just take them off and wash them yourself. And if you think about it, that's where shirts get dirty. So you didn't need the Chinese laundry anymore. So the laundryman is crying, and he's referred to as Othello. Once again, I don't know why. No reason for the name Othello. His occupation's gone, the handwriting on the wall. No more Chinese cheap labor. These 2 cards also advertise the collars, and I have the belief very strongly that in the top image, the man on the left in the water with the mustache, and the man on the bottom image in the center with the mustache is supposed to be Dennis Kearney. And in both cases, the top image, the Chinamen are going off to China in their laundry baskets as boats, and several of them are seasick over the edge of the basket. And in the lower image, there's an Irish washerwoman at the who I think is Dennis Kearney and the Chinaman. So once again, it's American ingenuity killing the jobs for the Chinese people. Now I'm going to show you a few images of businesses that advertised that they did not hire. This is from a hotel in Portland, Oregon. And the envelope is at the bottom, which pictures the hotel. But you'll see very prominently on the right-hand side of the business card, no Chinese employed. All right, the next image is of, once again, 3 businesses. The Live Oak Hotel, no Chinese employed. The American Exchange Hotel, white labor only. And the Head's Ideal Restaurant, white help employed, prompt service. So once again, the white help was to say we don't hire Chinese, we don't have Chinese working here. Mrs. Emma Kramer owned a laundromat in San Francisco. Laundry, excuse me, not a laundromat. Once again, white labor only. So this apparently attracted a clientele that did not. There was a stereotypical image. I have a brochure. There was an actual magazine for laundry workers and owners, and one of the articles talks about the Chinese laundry, and we have to get rid of them. The stereotype was that they spit on the clothes instead of sprinkling them with a sprinkler, that they spit. So this was the antidote to that. All right, this is the labor agent. Once again, only the highest grade white help employed. This is where you could get help, workers. The White Palace Hotel. Next is a label of grapes from Healdsburg, California, which is Sonoma County, and very proudly saying that white labor exclusively employed in this cannery. The Retreat Saloon, white labor cigars. So it was a way of attracting a certain clientele. The next one is one of the vegetable people images. I happened to find the card with this advertising with the Irish vegetable person. He's a potato, and if you look on his body, there's the face of the Irishman as well as the top. And it's the white labor shirts made by Otto Berman in San Francisco. I have several cards from this company, and I also have the shirt, and the shirt has the label that says white labor shirts, which I got on eBay. It's a beautiful, it's a white, like a tuxedo shirt. This is a Democratic ballot from Oakland. And you can see that right on the ballot, it says exclusion of Chinese. So there were no bones about it. They weren't hiding their racism. Protection of free labor and reduction of taxes. So this was the Democratic Party ticket for Oakland, California, for the presidential electors. Okay. Next, we have working men attention. This refers to the Burlingame Treaty, which is in your chronology. This was before any of the anti-Chinese legislation was passed in California. The Burlingame Treaty opened up exchange of people from China and the United States. And it's blaming the Republican administration, ratified by a Republican Senate, and its chief advocate was Anson Burlingame, a Republican member of Congress, representing the manufacturing districts of Massachusetts, which have since given large employment to Chinese labor. In North Adams, there was a big shoe factory, North Adams, Massachusetts, that is. The employees went on strike, and they were replaced by a whole group of Chinese men who came to work as strike breakers. So there was a lot of hostility for them when they came into North Adams, Massachusetts, which is in the Berkshires, the western part of the state. Okay, Kelly's Coolies. This is a Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a lot of wonderful political trade cards for their state and local elections. So this is for William Dara Cooley, Kelly, excuse me, who ran for Congress and served in the 35th Congress and up to his death in March 4th, 1861. So he served 14 terms in Congress, and he was a Republican, and he was pro Chinese immigration. And Lisa Baskin, this will interest you. His daughter was Florence Kelly, who was went on to mobilize women's power as consumers as a force for social change. She was a prominent female progressive leader who used union labor and power of boycotts. And she later created the National Consumers League. So she was the daughter of this man, and his pro-immigration platform was the reason for him being referred to as a coolie. Next. This is two sides of the same card. If you're pro the American flag, you're going to vote Democrat. You're going to vote for Grover Cleveland. And if you're pro-China, pro-immigration, you're going to vote for Benjamin Harrison and the Chinese presidential candidate. Now imagine this sign being up in Tacoma, Washington. There were riots in Tacoma, and one day the entire Chinese population of Tacoma was rounded up and put on a train and sent elsewhere. And that was called the Tacoma method of clearing out the Chinese. But still in 1902, 20 years after this initial incident, they're still having an anti-Chinese movement there. All right, this is kind of a little heartbreaking thing. This is a certificate of residence for a 5-year-old boy who is coming to Hawaii, to the island of Kauai, and he is listed as a laborer. He's 5 years old. And it says very clearly on the bottom, no Chinese laborer, no Chinese labor, whether he shall hold this certificate or not, shall be allowed to enter any state, territory, or district of the United States from the Hawaiian Islands, which of course at this time was a territory, not a state. So here's this 5-year-old child, a laborer, I would assume perhaps on a sugar plantation. It's just heartbreaking. So now I want to show you that there were Chinese people in the United States who were successful, who had businesses, and who were not victims of exclusion. This first one is Chan Hong, and he works for a firm in Chicago as a representative of a company that sells tea and Chinese goods. So he has signed the card in Chinese, and there is a photo of him. You notice he has not adopted Western dress yet. So this would have still been an area of discrimination or prejudice. The next picture, Louis the Chinaman is coming. So he's bringing the merchandise, and he's using the pigtail to pull the trunks. But he is working, and his firm is indicating we have a Chinese worker. This next photo, courtesy of Jose Rodriguez. This is an interesting shot. This is a man named William Lee Way, and he owned 2 laundries in Bristol, Connecticut. He married a white woman, a Polish immigrant, and they had 6 children, and it's pretty obvious by the way that they're dressed that they were people of means. Now, in San Francisco, there were still tourists who came to Chinatown who were interested in seeing what had been demonized so much. So this is a man who's a guide, and it mentions that he's a U.S. citizen. the original and only reliable Chinatown guide. And the next is the business card, one side in Chinese and one side in English, of a Chinese interpreter who translated Chinese and English and taught correspondence and business letter writing and represented the power company in Oakland. And another Chinese interpreter, also one side of the card in English, specializing in the practice of immigration and Chinese exclusion law. This is a court document from Fresno County where a man who's not Chinese, whose last name is Marquez, has been paid $3 to interpret in court for an insane Chinaman. Now, whether he was insane or not is probably questionable. He wasn't understood, and so if you're in court and you're not understood, you're going to act a little crazy, or what is interpreted as crazy. So this is why this man was paid $3 for his interpretation skills. This is a certificate of residence, once again, for an American citizen, 1936. You had to submit this to go visit China in triplicate with 3 photos, and he's permitted to leave and to come back. Without this, he would not have been able to come back. And a lot who went back to China were not allowed to come back to the United States. This is a speakers bureau in Boston, and if you'll notice, there are such prominent people as Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and Frederick Douglass, and Lew Wallace, who wrote Ben-Hur. And next to the bottom is Wong Chin-Fu. Anyone ever heard of him? Wong Chin-Fu? All right, next photo shows him. Notice that pigtail? And he started a newspaper in the United States, which was the first Chinese American newspaper, and it was called the Chinese American, and was believed to be the first use of that phrase. He went back to China. He was treated very badly there because they thought he was a revolutionary. He came back here. He went on the lecture circuit. He had an herbal medicine business, and a lot of people consider him to be the Martin Luther King Jr. of Chinese Americans. He went to Bucknell University in Pennsylvania, and on their website is a wonderful biography of Wong Chin-Fu. All right, this is a business card, and it says the Chinese must go. But when you read the rest of the card, it says the Chinese must go to this particular business for printing, and I believe it's probably in Boston, Summer Street. So they even capitalized on the phrase, the Chinese must go, not in the way, literally, I assume it's that they were not anti in the same way. And now, many products advertised that they had strength and power. This is, I love this, this is a medical product that is so effective that the Irishman and the Chinaman are toasting each other. And Uncle Sam is giving them this product which gets rid of indigestion and dyspepsia. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I just like to say this, that we have Facebook and all sorts of mass media now that hatred can be engendered and created very quickly and spread. And they didn't have that then. So this advertising was the means by which that hatred and animosity could be fomented. So when you look at these images and think about all the laws, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by Congress in 1882. It was not overturned until 1943 by FDR during World War II, because the Chinese were our allies against Japan. So it's just something to think about, how these images that we see had such a profound impact on American history and immigration. Those were the only laws that have ever been passed specifically aimed at a nationality, one specific nationality, and it was in effect for 60 years. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Oh, can I say one thing? I want to thank the dealers here who have contributed to my collection, who have specifically held things for me. That includes Steve Bullock, who's over there, who's probably contributed to everybody's collection in this room. Peter Luke, who is not here, but also has. Glenn and Judy Mason, who've brought me things from Oregon and the West Coast. Jose Rodriguez, I see I'm mentioning you twice, so you better find some more stuff. And everyone else who's helped me, a lot of you have, and I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, and Barbara Charles and Bob Staples, who sold me this wonderful game, which is like pin the tail on the donkey, but it's pin the pigtail on the Chinese man, and it's a wonderful thing. So to all of you, thanks again. Okay.